The morning Joel Harker walked into Meridian Auto's regional headquarters with grease still under his fingernails and his 9-year-old daughter, Rosalind, sitting in the waiting room downstairs eating a granola bar. He told himself it would take 15 minutes. He had the documents. He had the numbers. He had 42 pages of engineering assessments that proved without question that the transmission retrofit program Meridian was about to greenlight would fail inside 18 months and take 3 dealerships with it. He did not have an appointment. The receptionist on the 14th floor was named, according to her lanyard, Britt. She had the kind of smile that arrived before the rest of her face caught up with it. She looked at Joel. Work boots, canvas jacket, the particular kind of tired that comes from running a small business alone, and the smile held, but something behind her eyes recalibrated. "I need to see Catherine Voss," Joel said. "Ms. Voss is in a strategy session. Do you have an appointment?" "No. But I have something she needs to see before the Briarwood signing." Britt's fingers moved to her keyboard. "Are you a vendor?" "I was their head of powertrain engineering for 11 years. She typed something. Waited. Typed again. "I'm not finding you in the system. I haven't been in the system for 4 years. I left." He set the folder on the counter. "It's about the Briarwood contract, the retrofit specs. There's a material defect in the torque calibration sequence that Meridian's current team missed. If Catherine Voss signs that agreement today, she's authorizing a program that will generate 300 warranty claims in the first winter season alone." Britt looked at the folder the way people look at something they've been told not to touch. "Sir, if you'd like to schedule a meeting with our engineering liaison, there isn't time for a liaison. The signing is at 11. It's 10:40. I know what time it is." Britt picked up her phone. Joel could hear faintly the words she used. "Lobby security. Gentleman at reception." And then, quieter. "He seems agitated." He wasn't agitated. He was tired. There was a difference. He'd been awake since 4:30 reviewing torque curves and slip tolerances, and before that he'd driven 2 hours from Stanhope in a truck with a heat fan that only worked on the highest setting. His jacket smelled like burnt plastic and Canadian winter. Rosalind had slept most of the way, curled against the door with her backpack as a pillow, and when she'd woken up outside the city limits, she'd looked at him and said, "Is this the thing you've been stressed about?" He'd told her yes. She'd said, "Okay," and gone back to the granola bar she'd been saving since Tuesday. 2 men in dark security uniforms materialized from a door behind the reception desk. One was broad through the shoulders with the patient look of someone who did this every day. The other was younger, still getting comfortable in his authority. "Sir," the older one said, not unkindly, "I'm going to need you to come with me. I'm not trying to cause trouble. I have documents that need to reach Catherine Voss before." "I understand. We can discuss it downstairs. If she signs that contract without seeing these numbers." "Sir." The man's hand came up, a gesture rather than a touch. Gentle but unambiguous. "Come with me, please." Joel looked down the hall toward the glass doors at the far end. Through them he could see a conference room, people moving, sunlight off the lake, through the far windows. He went with them. They walked him to a holding area near the elevators. Not unkindly. The kind of space that existed to make problems disappear without making scenes. The younger guard stood at the door. The older one took Joel's folder, set it on a chair between them. "You can leave that here," the guard said. "If Ms. Voss's team decides it's relevant, someone will be in touch." Joel knew what that meant. It meant the folder would sit in a lost and found bin until someone threw it out in the spring. "There's a design flaw," Joel said, keeping his voice level. "The Briarwood retrofit uses a third-party torque modulator that was never tested above -22 Celsius. In Ontario alone, that threshold gets crossed 40 days a year on average. I ran the failure projections myself." Page 27. The guard picked up the folder, looked at it, set it back down. "I'm sure your concerns are noted. They're not concerns. They're load calculations." The guard said nothing. Joel's phone buzzed. A text from Rosalind. How long he typed back. "Give me a few more minutes." She replied with a thumbs up, and then, after a pause, a drawing of a car done in emoji that made no mechanical sense whatsoever. He'd raised her alone since she was 5. Her mother, Sandra, had died from a brain aneurysm on an ordinary Tuesday afternoon while Rosalind was at school, and Joel was at a powertrain testing session in Windsor. There had been no warning and no time. Just a call from the hospital, and then a drive that he remembered nothing about, and then a life that looked completely different from every angle. He'd stayed at Meridian for 2 more years. Then he'd taken everything they'd learned together in 15 years of marriage. Sandra had been a mechanical engineer too, better than him. She'd have said so herself, and he'd put it into a garage in Stanhope. Town of 8,000. Good winters. Good people. A daughter who was growing up knowing the names of every major engine component and still somehow preferred drawing animals over cars. The garage wasn't glamorous, but it was his, and it was honest. The elevator chimed. Joel looked up. A woman stepped out. Tall, late 40s, dark hair in a low knot, wearing the kind of suit that said she'd been in rooms like this for a long time and had stopped needing to prove it. She was mid-sentence with a man beside her carrying a leather portfolio, something about regulatory timelines and Q1 projections. She moved like someone who'd learned efficiency the way other people learn a language, early and until it became automatic. Catherine Voss. Joel had met her twice, both times in boardrooms when he still wore a Meridian badge. She'd been VP of Product Strategy then. Apparently the last 4 years had been good to her. He stood up. Mrs. Voss. She turned. Did exactly what Britt had done. A quick, unconscious read. Work boots, canvas jacket, the folder. The older security guard moving to intercept. Who are you? Her voice was measured. No alarm, no warmth. Joel Harker. I was head of powertrain engineering here until 2021. I'm here about the Briarwood contract. Something shifted in her face. Not much. The Briarwood signing is a closed session. I know. I drove 2 hours to get here before it closed. He held up the folder. There's a torque calibration defect in the retrofit program. It's in the specs on page 27. The third-party modulator Briarwood is supplying hasn't been validated for Canadian winter conditions. Not the real ones. The man with the portfolio, someone's legal counsel, Joel thought, from the way he was already pulling out his phone, stepped forward. Mrs. Voss, we should. The signing is in 12 minutes, Catherine said, not to Joel, but not quite to the lawyer either. Still processing. I know, Joel said. That's why I didn't call ahead. He'd tried calling. 3 weeks ago, and twice after that. The calls had gone to Meridian's engineering liaison desk, where a very polite woman named someone had told him his concerns would be passed along to the product review team. He'd sent emails. He'd sent the assessment itself, all 42 pages, to the 3 contact addresses he still had from his time at the company. Nothing. So he'd driven 2 hours with his daughter in the passenger seat and walked in the front door. I'd like you to look at page 27, Joel said. That's all I'm asking. 2 minutes. Catherine Voss looked at him for a long moment. Long enough that Joel thought, for half a second, she was going to take the folder. Then she looked at the older security guard. Call it in, she said. I want him removed. The guard reached for his radio. Miss Voss. The lawyer, Joel could see his ID now, Walter Grubb, senior legal counsel, put a hand up. If there's any validity to his claim, there isn't. Catherine's voice was flat. This is a disruption tactic. Someone doesn't want this deal to close, and they've sent a man with a folder to rattle us 20 minutes out. She looked at Joel, and for one moment there was something almost like pity in her expression. Just the shadow of it, gone before it settled. If your concerns were legitimate, they would have been raised through proper channels. I raised them through proper channels 3 weeks ago. No one called back. That's not my problem. It will be when the warranty claims start coming in. Catherine Voss turned away. Security, please remove him from the premises. The older guard's hand came down on Joel's shoulder, firm and final. The younger one moved to the other side. Joel felt the geometry of it close around him, the practiced ease of men who'd done this before, who knew exactly how to move a person from point A to point B without drama. He let them walk him to the elevator. What choice did he have? He wasn't going to fight 2 guards in a corporate lobby. He wasn't going to make a scene that would end with police and Rosalind sitting downstairs, watching her father get arrested through the glass doors. He knew which battles looked like battles and which ones looked like evidence. He let the elevator close. On the ground floor, Rosalind looked up from her granola bar. She'd found a chair next to a potted tree and was reading something on her tablet. She saw his face before she saw anything else, the way kids do when they've been paying attention to one face their whole lives. They didn't listen, she said. No, she nodded slowly. Bookmarked her page. What do we do now? Joel looked at the folder in his hands. 42 pages. 3 weeks of evenings after the garage closed, running calculations on the kitchen table while Rosalind did homework at the other end. Sandra had always said that the problem with engineers was that they thought being right was enough. Being right is just the beginning, she'd say. The question is whether you can make the right people believe you. He pulled out his phone. There was a name in his contacts he hadn't called in 4 years. A man he'd worked with in the early days, before the politics of a large company had made certain friendships complicated. A man who'd left Meridian the same year Joel had, under different circumstances, and had spent the time since doing something completely unexpected. He'd become a lawyer, not corporate, civil engineering disputes, product liability. The kind of law that looked at technical documentation the way Joel looked at an engine, as a system, where every part had a function and failures had causes. Joel stared at the name for a moment. Then he called. Owen Callard answered on the third ring. There was construction noise in the background and the particular crackle of someone walking in the cold. Harker, he said. It's been a while. Yeah. Joel stood near the doors of the lobby watching taxis go by outside. I need some advice. Are you in trouble? Not yet. But I think I'm about to be, or someone is, and I'm trying to decide if I'm the person who should stop it. Owen was quiet for a moment. Tell me, Joel told him. All of it. The specs, the torque calibration, the third-party modulator, the cold weather validation gap, the 3 weeks of unanswered calls, the drive from Stanhope, the folder on a security guard's chair. When he finished, Owen said, What's the contract value? For the initial retrofit program. About $80 million. But if Briarwood gets the full dealership network rollout, it's closer to $320 million. And you think the modulators fail at what? Minus 23? Minus 22. Maybe minus 20 in high-load conditions. Owen made a sound that was part exhale, part calculation. What's your standing? Former employee? I also own a 10% interest in the original patent cluster for the transmission architecture the retrofit is built on. Meridian licensed it from our team, from me and 2 colleagues. The licensing agreement has a quality maintenance clause. The silence that followed was different from the one before it, more attentive. Say that again, Owen said. Sandra and I co-developed the base architecture in 2014, before it was fully absorbed into Meridian's IP portfolio. The licensing terms required that any derivative application maintain certain performance standards. If they license the tech into a program that demonstrably fails those standards, then you have standing, Owen said. Harker, you have standing to file for an emergency review. I know. I didn't want to use it unless I had to. Why not? Joel looked at his reflection in the glass doors, a man in a work jacket holding a folder full of numbers. Because the licensing clause was Sandra's idea. She wrote it in because she said big companies always eventually try to cut corners, and someone should be able to hold them accountable. He paused. I didn't want to use it for money. I didn't want to use it to be right. I wanted to see if I could just tell them and have them listen. They didn't listen. No, so now we use the clause, Owen said. Not a question. Where are you? Meridian's regional office. Toronto. Don't leave. I'll be there in 20 minutes. Rosalind, who had been sitting 3 chairs away and not technically listening, looked up. Was that good news? Maybe, Joel said. She went back to her tablet. I'm hungry. I know. Give me a little longer. You said that before. I know. She pulled a second granola bar from her backpack. She'd come prepared. Owen Callard arrived in 23 minutes, slightly out of breath, carrying a briefcase and the remnants of a coffee he'd clearly been drinking while walking. He was taller than Joel remembered, or maybe just seemed that way in the coat. He stopped when he saw Rosalind. That's your daughter, he said. Yes. You brought your kid. She was at the shop. Mrs. Pedersen next door usually watches her, but she was in Barrie this weekend. Owen looked at Rosalind. Rosalind looked at Owen. You're the lawyer, she said. Apparently, Owen said. Dad says you're good. I'm working on it. He looked at Joel. Right? Show me what you have. They stood in the lobby corner, Joel walking Owen through the 42 pages. Owen asked questions that were better than the ones Joel had been expecting. Specific, technical, the kind of questions that told you immediately whether someone understood the underlying engineering or was just navigating around it. Owen understood it, more than Joel had thought he would, 4 years and a career change removed from the field. The gap is real, Owen said when they finished. Yes? And you tried to report it 3 times. Owen closed the folder. I'm going to go upstairs and file a notice of licensing clause review. It's not an injunction yet, but it will be if they try to execute the contract. He looked at the lobby ceiling, calculating. If the signing hasn't happened yet, it was supposed to be at 11. It's 11:14. Owen swore under his breath. Come with me. They went upstairs, Joel, Owen, and Rosalind, who had decided, with complete calm, that she was not sitting in the lobby alone again. Owen spoke to Britt at the reception desk with the kind of voice that came from knowing exactly what documents he was holding and exactly what they meant. Britt made a phone call, then another, then a third. They waited 12 minutes. Walter Grubb came out from the elevator. He looked at Owen's briefcase first, then at the documents Owen was holding, then at Joel. Mr. Harker, he said. Mr. Grubb, you understand that the signing is complete? Owen said. Grubb hesitated. Half a second, but Joel felt it. Not yet, Grubb said. Something in Joel's chest let go. I'd like 10 minutes with Ms. Voss, Owen said, with my client's documentation before anything is executed. Grubb looked at the folder again. Then he looked at Rosalind, who was standing very still beside Joel, holding her granola bar wrapper in one hand, because she hadn't found a recycling bin. Follow me, he said. The boardroom was on the 14th floor. 16 people around a table made from something heavy and expensive, documents spread across the surface, pens uncapped. Catherine Voss stood at the far end near the windows. She saw Joel and her expression closed like a door. This is not acceptable, she said. Mrs. Voss. Owen set the folder on the table. I'm Owen Callard, representing Joel Harker. Mr. Harker holds a co-ownership interest in the patent cluster your current retrofit program is licensed from, under a 2014 agreement with a quality maintenance clause. We're here to formally invoke that clause and request a technical review before contract execution. He slid a document toward her. You'll see there's a prepared application to the Ontario Superior Court of Justice for an emergency review order. It's not filed yet. I'd prefer not to file it, but I will in about 12 minutes if we can't have a reasonable conversation. The room was quiet. A man at the far end of the table, older, in a gray suit, Briarwood side, leaned forward to look at the document. He read for about 30 seconds. Then he put on his glasses and read again. Walter, he said. Grubb moved to look over the man's shoulder. A long silence. Then Grubb straightened and looked at Catherine. Catherine Voss was looking at Joel. You drove 2 hours, she said. Yes. And called 3 times. Yes. Because of a torque calibration variance. Because of a failure mode that will generate roughly 300 warranty claims in the first winter season, ground 4 dealerships' service departments, and expose Meridian to approximately $40 million in product liability once someone traces it back to the cold weather spec gap. Joel's voice stayed even. I didn't want the signing to fail. I wanted the contract to be fixed. Those aren't the same thing. Catherine looked at the man in the gray suit. He spread his hands slightly. Not my call. She looked at Grubb. He had the expression of a man calculating how much worse this could get. Then she looked at Owen's filing document again, at the patent reference numbers, at Sandra's name in the co-ownership field. That's Harker, she said. The other name, my wife, Joel said. She died 4 years ago. The interest passed to me. Catherine Voss was quiet for a moment. Whatever was moving across her face wasn't something Joel had a name for. It wasn't pity. It wasn't guilt exactly. It was the particular expression of someone recalibrating something they'd already decided. Page 27, she said. Owen opened the folder and found page 27. He set it in front of Catherine. She read it standing up, which told Joel something about her. She was the kind of person who didn't sit down to process difficult information. She moved down the page, then back up. Her finger found the torque load table. Stopped there. These are validated projections? She asked. Run against 22 years of Ontario temperature records and Meridian's own fleet usage data, which I still have access to under the licensing terms, Joel said. She read for another 30 seconds. Then she straightened, looked at the man in the gray suit. We need a delay, she said. The man in the gray suit. Briarwood's lead, it turned out, a man named Curtis Faber, leaned back in his chair. Catherine, a technical review, 2 weeks. Our engineering team validates or refutes Harker's assessment. If he's wrong, we sign. If he's right, we fix the spec and then sign. 2 weeks costs us. A failed retrofit program costs us the whole dealership relationship, Catherine said. I'm not signing off on a program that generates warranty claims in February. Not in this country. She looked at Curtis with the particular steadiness of someone who'd made similar decisions before and knew how the math worked. 2 weeks. Faber looked at his own lawyers. A quiet exchange. Then 2 weeks. Catherine looked at Owen. I'll need a temporary hold on the court application. In exchange for written acknowledgement that the review is proceeding under the licensing clause terms, Owen said. My client's interest in the process is documented. Agreed. Owen looked at Joel. Joel nodded. The room started moving again. People gathering papers, phones coming out, the particular sound of a plan being rescheduled rather than canceled. Walter Grubb moved toward Owen to discuss the hold agreement. Curtis Faber's people clustered in a corner. Catherine Voss walked over to Joel. She didn't extend her hand immediately. She just stopped in front of him and looked at him the way people look at something they need to recalculate. You should have been called back, she said. Yes. That's a failure on our side. I'll find out who let it sit. It doesn't matter now. It matters because it almost cost us $40 million and it absolutely cost you 3 weeks of evenings you probably needed for something else. She paused. You run a garage. In Stanhope. By yourself. Mostly. I have someone in on Thursdays. Catherine looked past him briefly to where Rosalind was standing near the door, watching everything with the calm attentiveness she'd inherited, as far as Joel could tell, entirely from Sandra. How old? 9. She came with you. There wasn't anyone to leave her with. Catherine was quiet for a moment. My father was a mechanic, she said. Not warmly, exactly, but honestly. The kind of thing you say when it's the truest thing available. Ran a shop in Hamilton for 30 years. I grew up doing inventory on weekends. Joel didn't know what to say to that. The patent interest, Catherine said. You could have led with it. 3 weeks ago. I know. Why didn't you? Joel thought about Sandra's handwriting in the margin of the original licensing draft. Her note that said, make sure they can't ignore the quality standard. People cut corners when they think no one's watching. Because it wasn't why I was calling. I was calling because I found a problem and I thought someone should know. Catherine Voss studied him for a long moment. Then she said, the review is going to take 2 weeks. I'd like your direct involvement, not as an adversary, as the engineer who found the flaw. We'll pay your time. You don't have to. I know I don't have to. A pause. Something shifted in her expression, just slightly, toward something more direct. I want the best outcome for this program. That means having the person who identified the problem in the room when we work through it. Is that acceptable? Joel looked across the room at Rosalind, who had found a chair and was back to reading her tablet with the complete composure of someone who had long ago accepted that her father's work was sometimes unpredictable and occasionally took all day. I'd need to know the schedule ahead of time, he said. I have the shop. We can work around it, and my daughter is not sitting in a lobby. Catherine looked at Rosalind again. Something moved through her expression that Joel couldn't read. We have a family room on the 3rd floor. She can use it. Joel exhaled, a long, slow release he hadn't known he was holding. All right, Catherine said. On the way down in the elevator, Rosalind stood between Joel and Owen and looked at the floor display. Did it work? She asked. For now, Joel said. What happens in 2 weeks? We find out if I was right. Are you? Yes. Rosalind considered this. Then it'll work in 2 weeks too. Owen looked at Joel. Joel looked at the elevator doors. From her mouth, Owen said quietly. The 2 weeks were not easy. Joel drove to Toronto 3 times, leaving the garage with a sign on the door and a voicemail explaining he was dealing with a family matter, which was the closest honest approximation he could find. Rosalind came twice. The 3rd floor family room had a table and a couch and a television that she didn't use, and she spent both visits doing homework and eating the snacks that appeared, quietly, without announcement, on the table each morning. Joel didn't ask who arranged it. He had a guess. Meridian's engineering team validated his cold weather projections on day 9. The torque modulator from Briarwood's supplier did fail below -22. Not catastrophically. It wasn't dangerous. It was just expensive. The kind of failure that ate warranty budgets and service hours and customer goodwill. The kind of failure that looked like bad luck until someone ran the numbers and realized it was bad specs. On day 11, Catherine Voss called Joel directly. You were right, she said. I know. The spec will be amended. Briarwood is working with a second supplier on a validated modulator. The program timeline moves back 8 weeks. A pause. The contract is being restructured to include performance guarantees. That's good, Joel said. Your licensing clause will be formally acknowledged in the agreement. Another pause, a different quality to this one. I'd like to offer you a consulting role, ongoing, part-time. You'd review major technical programs before commitment stage. Remote, mostly. We'd come to you for anything that needed hands-on. Joel was standing in the garage. Under the lift was a 2019 Ram with a suspension problem he'd been working through all morning. The shop smelled like oil and cold air and the particular satisfaction of a problem being methodically resolved. I'd need to think about it, he said. I'd expect you to. It'd have to be on my terms. I'm not going back to what I had before. The shop is. He stopped. Tried to find the right word. It's mine. It's what I have. I'm not asking you to give it up. I'm asking you to keep doing what you apparently can't stop doing anyway, Catherine said, which is checking the work of people who stopped double-checking their own. Joel almost smiled. Sandra would have laughed at that. A brief silence. Your wife designed the original architecture. Co-designed. She had the instinct. I had the load tables. She sounds like someone who should have been called back too, Catherine said. Careful. Not soft exactly, but careful. Yes, Joel said. She was. He watched a sparrow land on the windowsill outside the bay door, look around, leave. The Ram's suspension problem was a bent trailing arm, probably from a pothole sometime in the fall. Straightforward, he could finish it by 4. I'll call you by Friday, he told Catherine. That's fine. He went back to the Ram. Rosalind came home from school at 3:30, the way she did every day. She dropped her bag by the office door, looked at the truck on the lift, looked at Joel underneath it. What's wrong with it? Trailing arm? From a pothole? Probably. She pulled up a stool, the one she'd claimed at age 6 and never returned. The lady from the car company called you. How do you know that? Because you were pacing around the garage for an hour, and then you stood still and talked to someone for 11 minutes. And when you finished, you stood still for another 10 minutes. Joel came out from under the lift. You were in school. I'm observant in general. She looked at him. What did she want? He told her. Not all of it, but enough. The consulting offer. The terms. What it would mean for the shop schedule. Rosalind listened the way she always listened, completely, without interrupting. When he finished, she turned her stool slightly toward him. Do you want to do it? She asked. I want to know if I should. That's not the same question. He looked at her. 9 years old, Sandra's eyes, his stubbornness, and some third thing that was entirely her own. I think I want to do it, he said. I think it would feel like something I'm supposed to be doing. Then do it, Rosalind said, like it was obvious. Like wanting something and it feeling right were sufficient reasons, which maybe they were. Maybe that was something he'd forgotten somewhere between Sandra dying and the garage opening and the years of just keeping everything running. It'll mean some weeks I'm in Toronto, he said. I can stay with Mrs. Peterson. You'd be okay with that? Rosalind shrugged. She has that dog. A pause. Also, I'd come with you some of the time. You have school, not on Fridays in March. Joel looked at the Ram, looked at his daughter. I'll call by Friday, he said. You already said Friday. I know. I'm saying it again. She went to the mini fridge in the office corner and got herself an apple juice. Dad, yeah, you were right about the car thing. The transmission. Yes. No, I mean, she turned the juice box in her hands. You were right to go. Even when they didn't listen. You went anyway because the thing was true. She didn't look up from the juice box. That was the right thing. His throat did something unexpected. Yeah, he said when he could. I think it was. She went back to her stool. He went back under the Ram. Outside, the afternoon light came low through the bay window, the particular flat gold of a Canadian November, and the garage was warm from the heaters. And the trailing arm problem was straightforward and solvable, and somewhere in the building system of this small town, everything was exactly what it appeared to be. He called Catherine on Thursday, not Friday, because he'd already decided and waiting didn't improve a decision you'd already made. She answered on the second ring. I'll take the consulting role, he said. My terms. Your terms, she agreed. And I'll need the schedule 2 weeks out. Minimum done. And if I find another problem, I tell you directly. No liaison desk. A pause. Then, direct line. You'll have my number. I already have your number, Joel said. You called me. She made a sound that was the closest thing to a laugh he'd heard from her. Fair point. After he hung up, He stood in the office doorway looking out at the garage. The ram was finished, sitting clean on the floor, the alignment corrected, the suspension honest again. The shop was quiet. In the house connected through the back, he could hear Rosalind's music, something with too many drums that she'd been going through a phase with since October. He'd built this place after Sandra died because he needed something to do with his hands that was real and immediate and couldn't be outsourced to a committee. Every car that came through the door was a problem with a solution. Every solution was something you could see and measure and know. He still believed that. He'd always believed it. And it turned out that believing it loudly enough in the right room, at the right moment, with 42 pages of documentation, turned out that was sometimes enough, not always. He knew that, but sometimes. He turned off the bay light and went inside to make dinner, and Rosalind came down from her room and set the table without being asked. And the house was warm and quiet and full of the ordinary evidence of a life still being built. One day at a time, the only way anyone ever built anything that lasted.